them micro power up, really, Delta.
I wonder what ignited that.
Electricity.
For a month, United Salvage battled rough seas, environmental and bureaucratic concerns, and time to effect the salvage of MV Kirki. By retrieving the remaining 65,000 tonnes of oil, the biggest oil spill in Australia's history was averted.
Poor bastards.
The first response of help came from Lady Kathleen, which steamed at maximum speed from an oil rig some 80 nautical miles to the south. When she arrived, mid-morning, July 21, Kirki's crew were beginning to be evacuated.
It's too dangerous for him to go alongside. You can't do that. The only way you can pick up people is jump off in the water, jump in the water. You can pick up these and we can just go too high out of the water. But no, I should be riding the helicopters anyhow. It's only 2 more lifts and everybody will be off.
Yes, Captain, we will wait better than helicopters. But jumping in the water is very dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's more dangerous for us to come alongside because the ship rolls and we'll be grinding up and down there and you know, to try to jump from the ship when we're here, it'll be more hazardous than anything. So I think the safest way is to go by chopper.
Okay, Captain, we will wait the helicopter. Just I call it. Poly 1, Kirki.
The crew of Kirki were lifted by helicopter to safety and to the questions of waiting reporters.
Of being rescued yesterday, they told National 9 News how they tried to abandon ship, but their lifeboats were no good.
The captain of the Kirki says continual rough weather has dogged their voyage from the Middle East, pounding the vessel until it simply gave way.
But when you saw what was happening to the ship, what did you think?
My wife and my child.
And your crew?
I can do nothing for all. I can.
Every man for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yesterday, the Kirki's captain was angry about the time it took for him and his crew to be rescued.
I say Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. From 3 o'clock about. And the authority of the Australia come today morning about 8 o'clock. Nothing else.
Police Minister Graham Edwards says the rescue crews are heroes and should get a medal. Mr Edwards says the criticism is gutless and unfair. Federal Shipping Minister Bob Collins agrees.
There have been published criticisms of the response time to rescue the crew, and there is no question at all that those complaints are unfounded.
What the crew had left behind was a difficult and dangerous salvage operation. Lady Kathleen battled rough seas to pick up the ship's tow lines that had been left by the departing tanker's crew. One tow line snapped shortly after it had been secured. Mid-afternoon, July 21, and the weather had calmed sufficiently, and Lady Kathleen manoeuvred skillfully enough to land 3 of its crew aboard Kirki. They found the departed crew's baggage stacked near the lifeboats as they moved aft to connect Lady Kathleen's tow line to the casualty. This was the position at 1500 hours on July 21. Kirki was a critical 8 nautical miles from the coastal shoals when the Lady Kathleen commenced the tow.
It's under tow by the Lady Kathleen.
1700 hours on July 21, and the salvage team was mobilising.
I just don't want to give him any dirty air. Let him stay there. We're on there, don't you?
United Salvage Senior Salvage Master Captain David Hancox was flown in from Melbourne. After consulting Kirki's senior officers, he boarded the stricken vessel. Meanwhile, other United Salvage executives took to the boardrooms for urgent discussions with federal and state authorities. The salvage of Kirki and its dangerous cargo had become a matter of Australia-wide concern.
We have a situation where 10 to 20,000 tonnes of oil is in the sea. That is a catastrophe, type proportion oil spill. That's the worst category you could possibly have. It's a major, major spill.
The threat to our coastline is enormous. Pollution control equipment and personnel mobilised to deal with a potential environmental nightmare.
You've got to understand the life cycle of a lobster. And our concern is in 4 years' time, when this is old news, we won't have lobsters because they'll be killed in their infancy stage.
Late this afternoon, the oil was closing fast on island reserves off Jurien Bay. Conservation authorities unable to relieve the gloom spreading over local fishermen.
When the Kirki lost her threatening load, she did so right in the heart of the state's $200 million crayfishing industry. 60,000 tonnes of light crude oil pouring from the Greek ship's hull, prompting fear and action from fishermen whose livelihoods were disappearing as quickly as the clear waters of the Indian Ocean.
After the initial rush of crude from the tanker, it began to dawn on local fishermen the enormous threat it placed to their $500 million West Coast rock lobster industry.
Oh my God. My God, you poor bastards. I hope it keeps going down south. If that comes in, and it's got to come in, I've just got that feeling. No more.
So it's possibly the wildlife
that will be suffering the most.
The most, for sure, yeah.
The fishermen, well, you know, we can all go on the dole, but birds can't go anywhere else.
They left the ship in a very dangerous state. They knew they had a gas leak forward. They left the generators running, knowing there could have been an explosion on that ship.
Salva's first concern was to isolate live electrical cables dangling dangerously close to the leaking oil.
Are you going to lose your ship?
Yes. I don't like to lose, but lose the ship. Maybe today sinking, I don't know.
July 22 to 25, the salvage team assembled. Salvage personnel from throughout Australia, salvage equipment from far away as Brisbane, and on the seas, Vigilant, Sonia Viking, Pacific Chieftain, and a tug from Fremantle all converged upon the Kirki. Lady Kathleen was relieved by Lady Elizabeth for the tow north. What lay ahead was still a matter of time, weather and environmental concern. A number of options were considered.
Option 1, dump the oil at sea.
That's environmental vandalism.
Option 2, scuttle the ship.
But again, that oil would eventually come to the service.
Option 3, tow the ship to an overseas port.
Give it to somebody else. Australia can't handle it.
Option 4, tow the ship to safe anchorage in the northwest.
Strong environmental objections.
Option 5, transfer the oil at the current location.
Not viable because the weather conditions are so unpredictable.
Option 6, tow to an offshore island such as Barrow Island.
Some sort of deal will have to be struck with BP.
Option 7, tow the Kirki into a port such as Dampier.
As a normal ship, although she hasn't got a bow, and do a normal discharge.
Kirki was in fact heading for option 8, a ship-to-ship transfer in the sheltered waters off the northwest shelf. But to get there meant an 1,100 nautical mile tow of a badly deteriorated ship through rough seas and heavy swell. Just how deteriorated the ship was surprised salvage engineers. This was their first chance to inspect the ship's engine room and its mechanical defects and plan a course of action. The tug Wambiri acted as a shuttle, transferring personnel and equipment aboard Kirki and offloading the baggage of Kirki's crew. July 30, and many of the vessel's safety systems had been restored. The deck fire monitor system was tested by the surveyor from the Australian Maritime Safety Authority. In the engine room, salvage engineers were faced by the problems of neglected machinery. Automated systems had been bypassed. Numerous oil leaks required attention. And defective machinery, such as the fire pump, had to be rectified quickly. Priority was given to the inert gas plant. Designed to minimize the risk of explosion on a crude oil tanker, it was not operational. Engineers' investigations revealed many serious defects that demanded their immediate attention. The neglect and deterioration of the equipment was problematic throughout the vessel. The bearing of the tank wash and fire pump was extremely deteriorated, and when the pump was started up, it caused tremendous vibration. This tank providing foam to the ship's deck fire monitors was holed and wasted in many areas. In the engine room, leaks below the plates were constantly monitored. The engineers and salvage crew worked long and hard to restore vital safety systems to the vessel. July 31, and the pumps for the ship-to-ship operation were landed aboard Kirki by Pacific Chieftain after having been flown by RAAF Hercules from Brisbane. The inert gas plant continued to cause problems. The deck seal interface, an essential safety feature designed to prevent explosive gases migrating back to the engine room, was repaired. Blocked and ruptured water lines were bypassed. The deck seal tank was cleaned out and the system returned to its proper working condition. While many major repairs were hurriedly carried out by salvage personnel, Kirki was moving very slowly under tow. During the first week, towage speed barely reached 3 knots. A second tow line was connected to Pacific Chieftain and the two tugs continued the tow northwards. August 4, and repairs had been completed to the inert gas pump and the cargo spaces were inerted. Extra connections were made to the ballast tanks where crude oil was leaking via bulkhead fractures. Portable pumps were rigged to transfer oil from the damaged number 1 port tank aft to undamaged tanks. But with the deteriorating situation, more damage to the forward tanks meant further loss of cargo and a gradual sinking of the forward section.
The idea was to get all the oil out of the previous number 1 port, which had been a very happy little tank until we got no bad weather. We had to get about 5,500 cubic metres of oil out of that and keep it in the ship. Is it vaguely clear what we're trying to do?
Well, I think you've given a very lucid description of what's wrong and what we're trying to do now. I think it's quite clear.
August 5. The deterioration of the forward section was becoming serious, and the weather was worsening with an increasing southerly swell. Pacific Chieftain was detached, and as a matter of safety, all non-essential personnel were evacuated to Pacific Chieftain. Kirki's course was altered. In the calmer waters in the lee of the Montebello Islands, the forward tanks could be stabilised and the forward end raised. While the salvors struggled to keep the ship afloat, the battle continued ashore.
The Kirki remains some 170 kilometres off Dampier. The salvage operators say that unless it can be towed to calmer waters, it may have to be taken far out to sea and scuttled. Meantime, attempts are being made to stabilise the ship. At least 3 of its 16 tanks have filled with water and another 3 are cause for concern. A decision on the salvage operation and the Kirki's fate is likely within the next 24 hours.
Drastic measures are being considered tonight as the crippled tanker Kirki sinks lower in the water off our state's northwest coast. With 60,000 tonnes of oil still on board, its owners have been refused permission to bring it closer to shore. One option now, to destroy the vessel by blowing it up.
Tonight, the crippled tanker is being buffeted by 40-knot winds, her forward deck swamped by a 4-metre swell as she battles to stay afloat. Overnight, the tugboat Lady Elizabeth towed Kirki to within 40 kilometres of the Montebello Islands in an attempt to find calmer waters. Today, salvage crews made an urgent request to move the stricken vessel even closer to the islands, but a nervous state government said no, fearing the ship could break up at any time, her 60,000 tonnes of oil causing an environmental disaster rivalling that of the Exxon Valdez off Alaska 2 years ago.
It may be that the ship will suffer further structural damage, and if that's the case, it may be necessary for the ship to sink. Now, if that's close to our coast, of course, then the environmental damage or the impact of the environmental damage would be much greater.
But the company involved in the Kirki salvage is critical of the government's decision.
Let's not escape the fact that people are out there risking their lives, and nobody's brought this forward yet. There's been a lot of talk But no one, there's 20 men on board that ship that are risking their lives out there.
The state government cannot prevent the tanker from coming within 25 kilometres of the WA coastline, but Canberra has been asked to keep the ship 60 kilometres out. The salvage teams are now left with just two options: either transfer the Kirki's oil to a second tanker due to arrive in the area tomorrow night, or take her further offshore and sink her with explosives.
The Kirki has now been towed to within 25 nautical miles of the Dampier coastline. She sailed into calmer waters, but a political storm.
By tomorrow morning, the two ships will be steaming east about 50 kilometres off the Pilbara coast, just inside the state government's initial safety exclusion zone.
Mrs Beggs told Salvers that she couldn't agree to the request because of concern for the Dampier archipelago and other parts of the Pilbara coast. She had advised the federal authorities of the decision.
A salvor's primary duty is to save property, and thus the preferred alternative was a complex but controlled ship-to-ship transfer at sea. Additional personnel arrived to assist, while salvage crew transferred cargo aft and raised the forward section to enable the lightning tanker to berth alongside. By August 9, the situation was under control. The forward section was raised and final preparations for the transfer could be effected. More equipment was airlifted from Karratha. Excess water was discharged. It was the first opportunity for divers to survey and report on the underwater damage. This gave the salvors a clearer indication of the total state of the vessel. Preparations for the ship-to-ship operations were Australia-wide. Yokohama fenders arrived from all parts of the country. Essential cargo hoses were flown in and transferred by Pacific Chieftain.
Comes the second of the fenders.
On board Kirki, the salvage team worked to prepare the manifold for the hose connections. Scuppers were plugged to prevent any accidental spillage of oil into the sea during the ship-to-ship operation. But it was not only the ship that required preparation. Before the actual berthing, the captain and senior officers of Flying Clipper discussed every detail of the ship-to-ship manoeuvre with the salvage personnel.
Let's walk around the deck with this one.
Final checks on the troublesome inert gas system were conducted, and the deck inert gas line was unblocked forward by salvage personnel. Cargo hoses were ranged out on deck. With no power to the forward deck section, it was up to the muscle and determination of the salvage crew. The hoses were then connected to the manifold ready for cargo operations. With preparations almost complete, the troublesome electrical cables were secured, and a look around deck showed the extent of the deterioration of the steelwork. A final clean-up for Kirki and a well-earned meal break and rest for the crew. And for senior salvage personnel, last-minute calculations, checking and double-checking, and a prayer for calm weather. August 14, after 2 aborted attempts on the previous day, the crew were optimistic that it would indeed be third time lucky. Captain Hancock's held final talks with Flying Clipper, and all was ready for a third ship-to-ship manoeuvre. After synchronizing speeds with Kirki during the morning, Flying Clipper made her run. Winds increased and made the bow-to-stern manoeuvre even more difficult. But the tug maintained her tow speed of just under 5 knots, and Clipper moved alongside Kirki. Mooring lines were passed between the two vessels. It was not only a difficult operation, but with no power and limited mooring facilities, it was a time-consuming and physically exhausting exercise. As the two vessels slowed down to a more comfortable speed, the activity around the mooring lines sped up. These vital lines were constantly tended until all were secured to Captain Hancock's satisfaction. With both vessels moving easily through the water, the next move was to prepare the heavy hoses and pumps. With the hoses and pumps rigged from Kirki to Flying Clipper, pumping finally commenced at 2200 hours. By the next afternoon, the results of the ship-to-ship transfer were quite visible. Kirki rising in the water and Flying Clipper sinking with the weight of oil in her tanks. As Kirki rose, the extent of the damage forward became apparent. Nightfall on August 17, and the hoses were disconnected. The cargo operation complete. Captain David Hancock boards Flying Clipper to sign the cargo papers with its master. August 18. Early morning and Flying Clipper casts off. A month and many dramas later, and the cargo continues its journey to the Kwinana refinery.
Totally unrehearsed, that was.
For days, the coastal town of Jurien becoming the centre of a nationwide fight to save the environment. It's a fight which now appears won.
Quite confident that there'll be no tainting of the samples of the crayfish in that area by hydrocarbons from the Kirki spill.
For 2 months, intensive tests have been carried out on 40 samples taken from the Jurien region and a control area at Dongara. Cray and sediment testing free from contamination. The industry free from uncertainty.
It tells the crayfish fishermen that they should be confident that the animals are clean and healthy and that their markets should hold up.
A coastline saved, a successful salvage, Australia's biggest oil spill averted.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah?
Mate, we've been up here for about 2 hours now. Is it all right if we have one smoke? Just one.
No smoking in this helicopter, mate.
Go on, mate, just one.
Yeah, okay, just one, but make it quick, Wayne.
Oh, mate, that's better.
Well, hurry up, the Kirki's coming up. It's about a half a mile ahead, so finish it off.
You can see it, can you?
Yeah, hurry up.
All right, yeah. Do one more puff. We're nearly there?
Yep, I go, slow it down. Get rid of it, come on, hurry up.
Right,
now look at you, done one.
Back.
It's okay.
You're going to chop it behind
Just shoot.
I told you to back. You never look at me face. You never listen.
Serves you right.
Burnt, my hair's burnt.
At least you're awake now anyway.
Well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Just
we're in the shit, mate. We are in the shit.
Oh, you're probably winning an award for it anyway.
Me. You never listen, boss, do you? You burnt me face. Half my hair's been burnt. Now look what we've done. Hell.